Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission's generic proceeding in docket 2006-244-Z. G. At this point, we'll take a roll call of the commissioners. District 1,
Commissioner Williams is participating virtually.
District 3,
Caston participating virtually.
Commissioner, we can barely hear you, but we did hear you. District 4,
Irvin participating virtually.
District 5,
Thomas participating virtually.
District 6,
Commissioner or Chairman Williams participating virtually.
District 7.
Howard participating virtually.
Thank you, Commissioners, and I'm Florence Belser, Vice Chair, and I am present in the hearing room. At this time, I would ask that our attorney, Ms. Wessinger-Hill, read the docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. You are here today for the virtual generic proceeding noticed in docket number 2006-244G. This docket is the Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated reports filed in accordance with South Carolina Regulation 103-4112.2.7, the construction cost. This hearing has been scheduled and noticed for 10 a.m. on Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021, in the Commission's hearing room. Due to public health concerns and the COVID-19 pandemic, this proceeding has been scheduled to be conducted virtually. It is my understanding that all parties are present and participating virtually and are available and ready to proceed with their presentations in this matter. The docket is in order, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I would note that we tend to refer to all people appearing before the commission as parties, but I think that in this we have more presenters than parties. I don't think that we're calling that petitions to intervene were required, and so I think parties and presenters may be used interchangeably here. At this time, I'd like to get the appearances from all presenters. Who's here for Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated?
Good morning, Commissioner Belzer and Chairman Williams and members of the Commission. My name is Chad Burgess. I'm in-house corporate counsel for Dominion Energy South Carolina. And with me today is Matthew Gissendaner. He's also in-house corporate counsel. We also have with us Dustin Huey, who is the company's Director of Construction and Engineering. And Mr. Huey will be the person from the company presenting to you today. And I just want to say, Commissioner Belzer and members of the Commission, it's a pleasure to appear before you today, and we appreciate this opportunity that you have given us to explain and provide you with some details about some of the construction projects that we've noticed in the 2006 docket. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess, and welcome, Mr. Burgess, Mr. Gissendaner, and Mr. Huey. And who is here for Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League?
Sorry, my name is Lauren McGill Milton. I'm here for Blue Ridge.
Thank you, Ms. Milton, and welcome. Office of Regulatory Staff?
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair. This is Jeff Nelson for the Office of Regulatory Staff. We do not plan on making a presentation today, but are just here to observe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson, and welcome to you as well. We've got some feedback, and so if you're not speaking in the microphone, would you kindly mute your microphone?
You've got dual source of audio. Mr. Nelson needs to mute.
Mr. Nelson, I believe you may have a dual source of audio is what my technical folks are telling me from the back. If you could mute. Thank you.
We do not, Madam Chair. We're just going over the phone line here. We're not connecting on the audio.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there anyone here for the Department of Consumer Affairs? Thank you. Any preliminary matters before we begin presentations? Ms. Hill?
Yes, sir. Madam Chairman, There is one procedural preliminary matter that needs to be addressed. Prior to the start of this hearing and outside of the commissioners, there was a matter discussed and disclosed among the parties, and there is a written email where it is communicating where everyone agrees with regard to that. I would move at the appropriate time, Madam Chair, that the commission add that email and the related responses from all the participating attorneys as part of the record.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. We will put that with the with the court reporter's record for the record of this proceeding. Let's see. My understanding is this is a generic proceeding. We've asked for some information to be presented. We will proceed with the presentations. Commissioners will have the opportunity to ask questions. It's my understanding that because this is just a generic proceeding, requesting information with regard to these filings made in accordance with Regulation 103-412.2-7, that we will not be entertaining cross-examination from parties because this is not a quote-unquote contested hearing. So with that said, Mr. Burgess, would you like to call your presenter and proceed?
Thank you, Vice Chair Belzer and members of the Commission. Dominion Energy calls Dustin Huey. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Huey is the company's Director of Engineering and Construction, and he's got a slide deck that he's going to present to you this morning. It consists of about 13 slides. He's going to walk you through the projects that we have notified the Commission about. So without, certainly feel free to interrupt Mr. Huey as he proceeds in his presentation to ask questions, or if you prefer to wait until the end of the presentation, that's totally fine with us. So without further ado, I will turn my video off and I will hand this over to Mr. Huey and ask him to begin his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Before we begin, Ms. Boyd, our Executive Director, needs to address the feedback issue, if you would.
Okay, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Ms. Milton, you can't talk to us right now. We've kind of muted you. We determined that we think the feedback is coming from you. I'm going to ask Jackie to unmute you right now. Ms. Milton? Yeah. Ms. Milton?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have another source of audio? If not, what we're going to have to do is, would you mute your speakers, please? Computer speakers.
I'm not connected to the audio, and I just now unmuted. I've been muted ever since until you saw my name.
Okay. What we'll do, Ms. Milton, if you don't mind, we're going to mute you during Mr. Huey's presentation so the feedback is not there, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Huey, please proceed.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate you having me this morning. Look forward to making this presentation and sharing some of the things that we do and the projects that we noticed last year in 2020 for these construction updates. In addition to the construction updates, I thought it would be important to give a little background to the Commission as an overview of our system, as well as our planning process. And then in addition to that, just touch briefly on project life cycle, typical project life cycle from start to finish. So on this first slide, I wanted to point out over on the right-hand side, the map that's over there is just a good look at the state and our service territory and how things are broken up. So the tan color is our gas-only area. The blue is combination electric and gas, DESE has electric and gas customers, so those are areas where both of those overlap. And the green is electric only. So we currently serve a large portion of the state of South Carolina, as you can see, and especially along the coast, there is significant growth, population growth, all the way from Horry County down to Jasper County, as everyone is probably fully aware. So high growth territory for natural gas. We currently have 402,000 plus customers on the system spread across 35 counties. Our asset base is a mix of transmission and distribution pipelines. Have about 459 miles of transmission pipeline, anywhere from 2-inch to 20-inch. We have 10,000 plus miles of distribution pipeline. I did want to point out an error on the slide. I apologize for that. That should be 16-inch. So we've got distribution pipe anywhere from 1/2 inch all the way through 16-inch. And outside of those pipeline assets, we also have 2 liquefied natural gas facilities. One is located south of Columbia in western Orangeburg County, and the other is located just outside of Charleston. Moving on, I wanted to touch a little bit and describe how gas gets into the state of South Carolina, and talk a little bit about the transmission pipelines upstream of our system. So we rely on these transmission lines to bring us gas, and then we distribute to the local customers. So what you'll see on the map, we've got Williams Transco that runs through the northwestern part of South Carolina. Transco runs all the way from the Gulf of Mexico up to the shale gas areas in northeast United States. You've got Southern Natural pipeline that terminates in Aiken. That pipeline also originates in the Gulf of Mexico and distributes gas throughout the southeastern United States. So when we talk about these upstream pipelines, we talk about capacity, we also talk about supply, and I just thought it'd be important to describe those two things to you. So capacity is the actual space in the pipeline. It's the thing that we contract for on these pipelines, the transportation capacity, to be able to move the gas from the supply points to our customers. And then so in addition to capacity, we contract for supply, which is the actual gas molecule, the actual product from the producers. And so the combination of those two things allows us to provide gas to our customers. So when you look at the map, the other transmission company that you'll see in here is BHE, which is Berkshire Hathaway Energy. Most of you probably know that for us is Carolina Gas Transmission. That's the black and white pipeline network that you see sort of behind in the map. And the way that the South Carolina system operates is the gas comes in on Transco and Southern, and then CGT interconnects with those pipelines and then delivers the gas to our towns and local systems that are out there. So most of all of our interconnect points are on CGT. We have approximately 90 delivery points or interconnect points on CGT, and we aggregate those into these 9 area points that you'll see on the map. And the reason that we do that, it allows us to more efficiently contract for capacity, so long as it doesn't cause any issues on the upstream supplier system. And it also allows us to schedule daily gas volumes in groups rather than at each one of those 90 delivery points individually. In addition to all of those interconnects, we do have a couple of interconnects I'll point out directly to the upstream transmission pipelines. One's in Abbeville. There's a small gas system in Abbeville. We've got a few in Aiken, and then there's one in Bluffton, South Carolina, directly connected to Southern Natural. So one thing I wanted to point out while I was on this topic, the transmission pipelines, that I think is important to note just generally, is the issue of constrained pipelines upstream of us. So there's a high demand for natural gas in the state of South Carolina, not only residential and commercial, but also on the industrial side. We routinely get requests through economic development partners for information about gas availability at certain sites in South Carolina, and oftentimes those industries that are bringing jobs to South Carolina that are looking to locate in South Carolina have to locate elsewhere because there's just not the gas infrastructure needed in the state to be able to site some of those industries. And so just as an example of the fact that I think all of our economic development partners, our local planners and county planning offices, things like that, recognize that Horry County has their master plan, their county development plan is called Imagine 2040. And inside of that plan, they made a note when looking at, future of economic development, future of, the economy in Horry County. And one of the things they noted in there was, quote, while natural gas is often a necessary component in manufacturing, it's not readily available to existing industrial parks in the county. And so that's been a challenge for Horry County to attract businesses, bring, needed jobs, that sort of thing. Another example is also one of the regional economic development partners in that area, inside their strategic plan, they had a goal stated along with that, and quote, to develop a plan to expand natural gas in Horry County to provide service for industrial development. So I only bring that up, I only talk about it just to note that it is important. It does get a lot of attention across the state with economic development, with elected officials, with others. And so I thought I'd briefly mention that as I was talking about the upstream pipelines.
Excuse me, could I ask a question?
Moving to the next slide, touch a little bit on our planning process. This process is an annual process that we go through. It's an iterative process, meaning that year to year we're watching trends. We're looking at how the system's operating and reacting to various conditions that are out there, weather conditions and usage patterns and additional customers and that sort of thing. So over to the right, I know it's a little confusing to look at this if you're not sure what you're looking at, but this is the output of the model. We use a software program called Synergy Gas, which is fairly widely used in the gas industry and a trusted resource. But what this is, it's hard to tell. This is actually a map of the state of South Carolina, in Columbia. You can see the Fort Jackson gap over here. We do have some gas facilities in the very far corner of Fort Jackson. You can start to see the outline of Lake Murray over here. That's a little orientation, but the map itself, these are pressure nodes across the system, and the cooler colors are higher pressure, the warmer colors are lower pressure. And this is an example of a peak day model. What we do is try to look at how the system might react in various weather conditions, particularly on a peak day, cold day that we plan for, to ensure we provide reliable service to our customers. And so we would start initially by bringing in all the information from our graphical information system, GIS. We bring in customer load information from our CIS system, customer information system. We also bring in historical weather data, and all those things we put together. We balance the model, we tune the model, all with the goal of having that model mimic as closely as possible to the physical existing system in the field, and having that model allows us to do various things with it and to work through scenarios that we might have out there. And so what we can do then is identify projects that we need to alleviate some of the pressure issues due to growth on the system, and we also use this model for a variety of things on the growth side. So in addition to looking at how the system reacts year to year with added growth spread across the system, we can also model growth, future demand on the system. And so we have a variety of sources that we use for that information. Our sales and account management team works with land planners, developers, builders, other trade allies to gather strategic information about, land use, where land's being purchased for development, what builders are doing. They understand the builders, they understand the process they go through, and their plans. And more so understand what they're planning to do and where. In addition to that, we've got economic development information that I talked about earlier, and also we use a lot of county planning information from the various counties around the state to be able to determine when and where. And so we would actually go through an annual additional load process where we growth model out a number of years and forecast where we might start seeing issues on the system in order to address those with new infrastructure. All of this feeds into our infrastructure plan, which is effectively a list of the projects we're going to do over a certain time period. And typically that plan is about a 5-year plan of known projects. In our faster growing areas, that might stretch out to 7 or 10 years, but typically it's around 5 years. And then so for the projects that get identified on the larger end of projects, sometimes the smaller ones you can turn around same year, a couple of years. On the larger end, it takes a little bit longer to execute those projects. And then when we design them, we plan for about a 15 to 20 year horizon as far as demand is concerned. In addition to the planning purposes for the model, we also use these models for operational purposes, emergency scenarios, outage plans, and that sort of thing. Next up is project life cycle. Excuse me one second. This is an important slide. So talk a little bit about the work that we do and the what of what we do. Wanted to take a minute just to talk a little bit about how we do our work and the things that go into it and the effort that is put into doing it the right way. We're committed to doing this work in the right way. We're always looking for ways to do it better, to make improvements in our processes and the way that we do things and the way that we communicate with our stakeholders. In South Carolina, DESC, formerly SCE&G, we've got a long history of planning and constructing and operating these pipelines in the right way to meet our customers' expectations, and that expectation is safe, reliable, and affordable energy. We have a lot of different projects on our system. We do many projects every year, all the way from the small projects, the small main extensions, to individual customers up through these larger transmission lines that move high volumes of gas long distances to where the load centers are. And the process I'm describing here is really for the larger, more complex projects. The smaller projects might have pieces and parts of this process, but maybe not the entirety of it. And those projects are usually, longer planning, longer execution timelines. And just to give you an idea of the time frame, a lot of these projects, development through construction and in-service and restoration is, oftentimes a 2 to 4 year project life cycle. So starting out in the planning and identification phase, talked a little bit on the previous slide about how we identify projects that are a result of growth on the system. In addition to that, our project plan would include a variety of other types of projects, like economic development, industrial requests that are out there, third-party relocation. So a third-party relocation, we operate a lot of our pipelines within road rights-of-way, whether it's an SC DOT road, a county road, a city municipal road, what have you. We're operating by encroachment inside of those rights-of-way, meaning it's not our easement, it's the road owner's easement, and we're there by encroachment. And so when they do road widening projects or other improvements to their roads and our pipelines are in the way of their designs, we're moving our pipelines out of the way. And so we have a lot of third-party relocations. There's a lot of penny tax programs and road improvements going across the state. And so us, as well as all the other utilities that operate in that same manner, are moving lines all the time. In addition to those, we have regulatory requirements. We're governed by CFR 192 And so there's a lot of projects that fall out of the distribution integrity plans that we have, as well as the transmission integrity plans. And then, maybe not finally, there's obviously other ways that things could come into the plan, but one other way is outdated equipment. We have a lot of above-ground appurtenances, regulating stations, where we cut pressure from a higher pressure to a lower pressure. And as those become outdated, as equipment becomes obsolete, we put those in the plan for replacement. After the planning phase, we move into engineering design. In the initial stages of engineering design, the first step really for new rights-of-way, anyways, on larger projects, if it's a brand new right-of-way, what they call greenfield pipeline, which is going to be brand new, uncut, those sorts of things, we would do a route plan, route analysis for those. We have in our combo areas, and sometimes in other areas, we also do what they call brownfield installations, which is utilizing existing corridors. And so because we have so many rights-of-way, existing rights-of-way, combination electric and gas rights-of-way, oftentimes we can make use of those. And so for those pipelines, the route studies might not be as extensive. So there's a lot that goes into route planning. Consider a number of factors, including environmental, endangered species, cultural impacts, landowner and community impacts. We look at constructability of the pipeline. We look at, just mentioned utilizing existing corridors, and we also consider ongoing maintenance and can we safely operate and maintain that pipeline after we install it. We're committed to doing all of this process the right way. We're committed to understanding the needs of our customers, understanding the impacts that our pipelines and our projects have. And so we work hard to engage stakeholders through public outreach to elected officials. We do a lot of tribal outreach, landowner communication, and then depending on the project, there are sometimes specific groups or stakeholders that come up on individual projects that we also create a plan and work through an outreach to ensure that we're getting all the information necessary to execute the project the way it should be. In addition to some of the outreach, we do a lot of studies along the way, environmental studies. We're also looking at, plant and animal endangered species, and, if there are avoidances or relocations of certain things that can be done. We look at cultural and historic sites. There's a lot of that, particularly in the low country of South Carolina. There's a long history in and around the Charleston area and other parts of South Carolina. So all those things are important to us as we plan our work. After the route planning is done, there are other design considerations. Obviously, designing pipelines, you've got to go through the technical piece of that. We look at construction methods. There's a variety of construction methods we can use on these pipelines depending on the circumstances of the installation. We're always looking for avoidance of impact, or if we can't avoid it totally, mitigating those impacts. And as it is with safety, where your first choice is to engineer out the safety, your second choice is PPE or personal protective equipment. We're looking to reduce our impacts through design, and one way we do that, an example of it, is horizontal directional drill. It's a trenchless technology. We can go up under sensitive areas, under major roadways, and that sort of thing. So the bottom right of the screen, you'll see a picture, and this is what they call a drill string. It's the pipe that's welded together behind the hole that they drill out, and then they'll pull the pipe in after that. And so this is a picture from a job in Bluffton we did right north of the South Carolina-Georgia border. Last year, it's about 3 miles of pipeline, and I think 80 or 90% of that job was horizontal directionally drilled. After the engineering design, we know what we want to do and where it needs to happen. We work through project permitting and land acquisition. So on the permitting side, as you can imagine, there's many, many permits that are necessary for these projects, including, predominantly environmental, so Army Corps permits, DHEC, municipal stormwater, local county permits and ordinances that we have to follow. In addition to that, we've got road encroachments that I mentioned earlier. Sometimes these big pipelines do cross major roads that we have to have encroachments for. We cross railroads. We have to work with the railroads to make sure it's done right. External loading is considered, and make sure that the safety of the railroad and safety of the pipeline are considered as we do things. So we work through road permits, and then there's a variety of permits that might be necessary as you work through individual projects given where they are, and so we work through that process. On the land acquisition side, we work with our landowners. It's a collaborative process that's based in good open communication and keeping landowners informed. Many of these pipelines, we've got pipelines we've operated since the 1960s in a lot of these areas, and we know that long-term relationships are important. We want good relationships, open communication. We're going to be there a long time, and so we work hard to make sure that we can make that happen. We're committed to reaching agreeable outcomes on all these land acquisitions, up to including, fair compensation for what's there. And so, like a lot of other processes that we've described in here, doing this the right way takes a lot of open communication, a lot of effort to get it done. After project permitting, land acquisition, once we have what we need to go to construction, we move into the construction phase. And our primary objective in constructing these pipelines is to do it safely. We've got to not only look out for the safety of the contractors that are there, our employees, the general public, the landowners, community at large. We're using roads and other things to get there, and so we got to take care that we do it the right way and protect all that are involved. Safety's paramount in all that we do. We are looking to, you talked earlier about avoiding impacts through design. Some of those impacts can't be avoided entirely, and so we often look during construction to minimize those impacts. And we use various means, best practices to do that. For example, stormwater best management practices intended to keep sediment off of, or on the right-of-way and not leaving the right-of-way. Construction methods like horizontal directional drill, we talked about limiting disturbances. So in some of the more sensitive areas, we'll narrow the right-of-way and the workspace to ensure we limit impacts to only what's necessary. And then responsible restoration. So the bottom left, what you'll see is a fully restored right-of-way. This is a picture from a recent project, Camp Hall down in Charleston. And in the foreground is, the wetland that we crossed. And in the background, it's kind of hard to see. The pipeline goes, as the way the picture goes, off into the distance. And that backside is a, fully restored, covered right-of-way. Just as an example of some of the things that we do as far as addressing concerns of stakeholders and things like that, I'll talk about a project later, East Edisto. One of the things that we did on that is a significant amount of drilling. So about 60% of that project is going to be installed via horizontal directional drill. And along the way, as we were doing outreach, working with stakeholders, we had a group that was concerned about some cultural sites along the route. There's a large land area down there that's referred to as the Ashley River Historic District, and we worked with that group, including the National Historic Trust, to work through their concerns and address those, and we addressed them in a couple of ways. One, we're going to do a lot of training prior to construction, of the construction teams, the inspection teams, so that they understand exactly what they're to be looking for from an archaeological artifact standpoint, changes in soil conditions in the ditch lines, that sort of thing. And we're also employing the services of a construction archaeologist, and they'll be called to site periodically to survey the spoil piles, to look over things, look for artifacts, also look at the ditch walls for things that may be of concern. And our goal there is to protect any artifacts that we might find and protect integrity of these historical sites and historical areas of our state. So just to wrap things up, the planning, design, and construction of these pipelines is a complex process. It takes a lot of time and effort to do it the right way. We have profound respect for the communities that we serve and the right to, or that we get to serve these customers. And so we live and work in these communities also. And so it's important for us to get this process right. We work hard to do that. So that's the overview section. I'm going to move on to the project overview. So this is a look, high-level look across the state at the projects that are out there. You can see a lot of activity along the coastline, which we talked earlier about, the significant increase in population, last couple of years and forecasted into the future. So we have a lot of projects along the way. One of the things that I did read the other day, some of the census information that's coming out recently in South Carolina is actually number 6 in the nation as far as population growth from 2019 to 2020. I think a lot of us feel that if you're in some of these areas, you notice how fast they're growing. The demand for natural gas continues to go with that and go up. System-wide, DESC, we've seen over 3% customer growth the last 3 years and over 2% since 2014. So continues to be strong demand for gas, for the reliable energy and affordability and comfort it provides. First project is, actually the first 3 of these will be in Myrtle Beach. So just want to talk a little bit about Myrtle Beach growth. System-wide, we're at 3%. One number that sticks out is over that same time period, the customer increase we had in Myrtle Beach 2019 to 2020 is 14.9%. So strong growth continues down there and is forecasted in the future. I mentioned Horry County's Imagine 2040 plan earlier, their comprehensive plan. In that plan, they talk about population growth and expectations, and they're expecting in the plan to grow 89% of the population between 2015 and 2040. And the way it works out, when you factor in the number of people per household they assume, it's over 100,000 housing units that they're expecting in that time period, the next 20 to 25 years. So this project in particular is a project in the Carolina Forest area, if you're familiar with that part of Myrtle Beach. It's a 2.3 mile, 8-inch polyethylene or plastic pipeline. It's intended to serve new residential and commercial growth along the River Oaks corridor. So the project is this red line. The other lines that are out here is the rest of the system, the gas network that's there. And so the Carolina Forest neighborhood and development is on the north side of Highway 501 as you come into Myrtle Beach. And this area was a planned development that started probably 10 or 15 years ago. They estimated or approved about 40,000 units, residential units within that development, and it continues to be strong growth. We've got a little over 2,000 customers currently in just this area. This pipeline, they're adding new residential subdivisions along the way. There's also a 46-acre mixed-use development that's located on what's called the back end of Carolina Forest. be commercial, restaurants, stores, shops, those sorts of things. And then recently, McLeod Hospital System announced a 4-story, 48-bed hospital that they're going to locate on the backside of International Drive, which is to the back end of Carolina Forest. Again, they've already got some medical offices and some other things over there. And so a lot going on, a lot of people moving in the area, and a lot of commercial and other things to support that. The other benefit of this project has got, multiple benefits, and one of them is reliability. Currently, all 2,000 of these customers are served on a one-way feed from the transmission line that runs along Highway 501, and so this will allow us to make a secondary tie-in that will provide, much-needed reliability to that system. Also in Myrtle Beach, on the south end, down near Garden City, Myrtle's Inlet, Surfside Beach, there's a lot of growth down there too. There's a lot of open land. The land use lines up with further development. And then in addition to that, there's a Highway 31, which is a major highway that runs along parallel to the coast. They terminated that highway recently just north of this project site on Highway 707, and that has opened up development in the area, not only access during, peak tourist season, but also the ability for, folks to get safely out in a timely fashion during hurricane evacuation. So that's really spurred some of the development down here. So this is a 2-mile, 6-inch polyethylene plastic pipeline intended to serve, again, new, residential and commercial along McDowell Shortcut, as well as Highway 707, which we just talked about, which is the major thoroughfare coming down into the Myrtle's Inlet and Burgess communities that are down there. In addition to the new customers, as it was with the last project, this also has a secondary benefit of tying 2 of our laterals together and allows us to provide reliability to the customers inside of those systems. The last one in Myrtle Beach, this is a 3.9-mile, 8-inch steel pipeline project. The way the system functions is the transmission line comes in on Highway 501 and then splits north and south along Highway 17 bypass into a high-pressure system. So we cut from about 500 PSIG to 150, 200 PSIG to move the gas north and south to be able to drop off into these distribution lower pressure systems along the beach where the bulk of the customers are. Talked about Horry County's plan a little while ago, and while you can't see it on this map, due to a lot of the geography in the area and the land use, a lot of the growth going forward is being planned for North Myrtle Beach, Little River, Longs, on up Highway 9 out to Loris, along Highway 905 back towards Conway. And the way that our system currently is set up, all the gas comes in here and is distributed north and south. And so there's a real need to boost the pressures going north to be able to serve some of that demand that's coming out there. And so we're adding a 8-inch line to be able to serve the customers and the demand on the north end of the Grand Strand. Talked a little bit earlier about the various types of projects that we might have in our infrastructure plan that we do. Talked about a third-party relocate. So this is a good example of one of those. The SC DOT in Sumter is doing a widening rehabilitation of North Main Street. They're doing a beautification project, and so we've got some steel pipelines along that route. Much of Sumter is an older system, so a lot of the pipelines in that system are steel, and in order to maintain cathodic protection and some other things that we need to do, we're replacing the steel with steel, where sometimes we would look to replace it with polyethylene or plastic lines that are newer vintage and require less maintenance. But we'll be replacing about a mile, 1.3 miles down through here, along with the DOT project. Another one I talked about earlier was, that go into the infrastructure plan. There's the system-wide kind of organic growth. There's also individual customers that pop up that, need a lateral for, say a single customer or a small group of customers that's easily identifiable. So MUSC is building a new hospital outside of Cades, South Carolina, which is just south of Lake City, if you're familiar with that area. We've got a distribution system that runs south towards the county line there, and we're extending that line south to be able to serve the hospital. There's also expected to be a number of other businesses that come up around there, fast food or medical offices or things to support the hospital. And so this pipeline is intended to serve that demand that's going to come up in and around that hospital as well as the hospital itself. This is a project in Charleston. It's one of the larger projects that we have that we noticed last year. This project is a 14-mile, 12-inch steel project that's running from Bees Ferry Road down here in West Ashley along an existing electric transmission corridor, and is going to end at a couple of tie-in points to the distribution system south of Summerville. So it's going to provide some support into Summerville. But along the way, looking at Charleston, looking at land use, looking at future development, the peninsula, Johns Island, James Island, other areas up the 26 corridor, a lot of saturation in those areas. And if you look at where things will grow, need to grow in this area to accommodate the large influx of people, this is where all the planning is happening, where there's lots of developments approved already. And so some of the ones that we'll be serving along the way, East Edisto, tens of thousands of acres out here, much of it protected and set aside in conservation. But there's also a large amount of development out there. East Edisto, the information we have is they're currently planning for about 4,000 lots in East Edisto. Long Savannah is another large development along the route. They're currently planning for about 4,400 lots. In addition to that, a little bit north of here is a development called Branton, and they're currently scheduled for over 5,000 units, and there's smaller ones along the way. I say smaller, relatively smaller. They're still really big developments. Watson Hills, 950, Poplar Grove, 617 lots. But another one of the key things on this project is the Pine Hill Industrial Development that's near East Edisto. There's a lot of activity in around there, a lot of interest in that site to bring industry, jobs, that sort of thing to the area. And that's located right here at the end of the pipeline on the northwest side. So long term, this pipeline, also provides for some of the increased infill development that's happening down in Johns Island, James Island, and those places, West Ashley. It also allows us to supplement gas into Summerville to help reliability and to serve the ongoing growth in those areas. The last project that was noticed last year was a project called Ferry Wharf. There's a large mixed-use development that's taking place down at Patriots Point in Charleston, hotels, restaurants, residential, other development that's down there. They require gas for what they're doing, and so we're running a pipeline, 3.7 miles of 6-inch plastic along Mathis Ferry Road down to Patriots Point. This pipeline allows to serve some new and existing residential and commercial along Mathis Ferry, as well as along Highway 17 that's down through there, where we don't currently have a lot of gas infrastructure, and there's a lot of gas requests and needs. Even as we announced the project, lots of calls coming in to our sales and account management group, hotels, restaurants, other people looking to switch to use gas. in their businesses. So that's the end of the projects that were noticed last year, the 7. I did want to take a minute. I had a chance to read the South Carolina Environmental Law Project presentation, and they referenced a project in that presentation called River Neck Road. And, while I have I'm doing my presentation, I want to just briefly mention that. The reason it was not noticed last year is that that project is in the preliminary earlier stages. It's currently under permit review, and so we don't have any permits as of yet. It's currently not, a fully vetted, approved construction project, and our intentions were, like we have for all of the other projects, to submit notice closer to construction, which is currently scheduled in 2022. And so a little bit about that project. It's a 15-mile, 16-inch line that starts at the interconnect point with CGT in Florence County, and that interconnect is called River Neck Road. As you might imagine, it's right there near River Neck Road. And so that interconnect is the start of the transmission system that feeds Horry County and Myrtle Beach and several other areas. But it's about a 50-mile transmission system that starts there and ends in Myrtle Beach, but transitions through Conway. And so it's very large, long haul from the source gas all the way down through there. And so a lot of the development we talked about earlier, the growth in Horry County, the projections, population increases they're expecting, this pipeline, the intent of the pipeline is to serve that demand downstream. The end of the pipeline is at a current junction point on our transmission system. It's called the Kingsburg Valve Station. And at that point, the transmission system splits. There's a pipeline that heads to Conway, as I just talked about, and then there's a pipeline that heads south to Johnsonville, and then it's connected over to Lake City with some distribution pipelines. But that was a natural stopping point for us for this project. Made a lot of sense to end the line at a known above ground valve station, and that's the reason that we're terminating the line there. This pipeline also follows an existing corridor, so there's a line that is in the current 40-foot easement that we have through there. The line's operated since the 1960s efficiently and without issue along that route. We are intending to install the pipeline within the existing 40-foot easement. We are, however, getting an additional, we're widening the easement, the full easement. We're getting an additional or seeking to get an additional 10 feet. And the purpose of that 10 feet is to allow us to safely and properly install and construct the new 16-inch line, but also to allow sufficient room to safely operate that pipeline and maintain that pipeline going forward. In addition to the permanent right-of-way, there's temporary right-of-way that's necessary for construction along the way that we're looking to, again, ensure that we can safely construct a pipeline, and then those areas will be fully restored when the pipeline's over the temporary spaces. So that's a little bit about that project. I thought I'd mention it since it was mentioned, and just let you know why it wasn't in our notices from last year. That concludes my presentations, and be glad to take any questions or answer anything that I can.
Mr. Huey, thank you for your presentation. I have received word that Commissioner Caston has some questions. Commissioner Caston?
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Commissioner Caston, we can't hear you.
Let me call in on the call bridge.
Can y'all put Commissioner Caston on the screen for me? Okay, Commissioner Caston, can you hear us?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, we
yes.
still can't hear you. Try again?
Can you hear me now?
Got you now. Thank you, sir.
Sorry for the confusion. Mr. Huey, thank you so much for that presentation. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Huey?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Earlier, I'd heard you comment about the lack of gas infrastructure is hurting industrial development, bringing in new development and such.
Commissioner Caston.
And I'd heard that in, I think, our
Commissioner Caston.
maybe the rate case for Dominion also. Let me ask you this: who is
Commissioner Caston.
responsible for the planning, long-range planning and planning for gas transmission supply?
So,
Commissioner Caston.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, it's Jocelyn. What if I call you? I'm going to call you, okay? Because we hear some feedback.
That'd be great.
All right, hold on. I'm going to call you.
Mr. Huey, just bear with us a moment, please.
On which phone?
I'm going to call you on the phone that I most recently contacted you on. Is that okay? It is. Oh. Shake your head up and down or thumbs up if it's okay. All right.
am I okay to proceed with the answer, or am I waiting?
Mr. Huey, would you wait just a second till we make sure we get Commissioner Caston on the phone, please?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Caston, you there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. There we go.
Okay, Mr. Huey, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Commissioner Caston, if I understand the question, I think you asked who's responsible for long-range supply planning. Is that correct?
Yes, and I guess the transmission lines, just the gas. And, I've heard it more than once that there's a lack of infrastructure. It's affecting development. It's affecting a lot of things.
Yeah.
Just for my edification, who's responsible?
Yeah, certainly. So I'll talk internal to DESC. So we've got a couple of groups. One that does supply planning. They're looking at the demand, the other things that are on the system and forecasting what our demand might be. My team, effectively, we look at, okay, well, how are we going to get that to the customers? What's the infrastructure necessary to make that happen? The part that we don't control is the upstream part. And so these transmission pipelines are FERC regulated. And the FERC process requires full contract in order to even begin the process and to build it. And so they can't do anything speculatively. They have to have fully committed, fully contracted customers in order to do that. And even then, it's not a given that you're going to be able to execute the project. And so the difficulty is in the upstream pipeline. So Southern Natural, Transco, and to some extent CGT, Berkshire Hathaway, to be able to go execute that. And there's not a lot of pipeline development happening right now. There's a lot of hesitancy in the industry to develop any new infrastructure. And so it's really difficult to get anything going. And we're a small piece of that puzzle. We don't have even if we had, a demand out there, you need significantly more than that to be able to generate the need for one of these upstream pipelines. And they're fully constrained.
So are you saying, or it's what I'm hearing, the cost of I guess, FERC or FERC requirements or regulations, you can't, I guess, prepare or increase capacity, do whatever, unless it's a contract or known amount. You can't prepare for the future. Is that what you're telling me from a supply and
correct.
transmission?
That's exactly right. On the FERC side, they can't hold speculative capacity. They've got to sign contracts with folks that are going to take the gas, and they have to be fully executed to proceed with the project.
Well, as far as what Dominion or the gas companies in South Carolina can control, I think I understood you to say, does Dominion or you guys have a 15 to 20 year planning period? Is that what you were saying? Is that what I understood?
Yeah, so when we design pipelines, what I was getting at there was if I'm designing a pipeline, for example, the River Neck Road project that we talked about, when we're looking at sizing that line, we're looking out forward. We're calculating what is the need, and so we look over a 15 to 20 year period to determine effectively how large does the pipeline need to be to accommodate that, taking into consideration that in any planning model you're going to overshoot, undershoot, potentially those things.
Mr. Huey,
Yes.
This is Vice Chair Belser. Would you please take your presentation off your screen so that we can see you when you're talking?
Yeah, very sorry about that.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
And that makes sense. You're talking about projected growth 15 to 20 years so you can properly size your transmission distribution lines, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So does that mean, I'm assuming if that's the case, you guys have a 15 to 20 year master plan?
We have, so let me back up. I'll try to say it again. Maybe I said it the wrong way. Our plan, our infrastructure plan, the projects that we put out there, that flow into the capital plan, that is probably more of like a 5 to 10 year outlook as far as that plan. What I meant earlier was if I'm sizing for the future, if I know I got to do a project and it needs to be in service in the next, say, 3 to 5 years because there's currently pressure issues downstream, when I go do that project, the question is how big does it need to be? What do we need to do? And at that point, that's when we're looking out 15 to 20 years to properly size that line.
I don't mean it's critical, but that sounds reactive to me rather than forward thinking, because if I understood it correctly, you said you had two main supply lines that have, I think you said five points within the system somewhere. In other words, you know where your supply is coming from, and you know your service area. And in those service areas, I'm assuming you have growth projections. I don't understand how you cannot plan for the next 15 to 20 years, but then on segments of the line, you'll assume or do a projection for 15 to 20 years. So you're telling me there is no 15 to 20 year master plan for gas transmission or distribution?
Not in our area. A lot of the information we get, meaning that the sales and marketing folks are getting from the industry, a lot of these county plans, they are 20-year plans in some areas, and we do look out that far. We just don't, document the specifics of the project. We know the areas we're going to, and we know what when we growth model out. We know where the pipelines need to be and the current infrastructure and that sort of thing. But no, sir, to answer your question outright, we don't have a 15 to 20 year identified project list growth plan.
So the lines, presentation you just gave us, the particular lines, were these just reactive lines? Those were just things that came up?
I wouldn't go so far as to say they're reactive, meaning we didn't see it at all. We know by some of our planning efforts and the relationships we have, again, with builders and developers and land planners and folks in the industry, and also, the county planning, where the land use and where the development, where they're anticipating development. We know where other utilities are planning their kinds of things. And so we're watching, but oftentimes these projects get delayed. Development agreements take a while. Projects get canceled along the way, or, the project was intended to, be out there 3 or 4 years from now, and now it's 6 to 7 years out there. And so we're building as we need to build out the system. We do see it. It's on the horizon. It's in some of our planning documents, but it's not necessarily in a list of our infrastructure plan, which then, folds into the capital plan.
Well, I'll agree, and that there's no plan that's, so black and white that it can't be modified and won't change the course of time. I know there's utilities in that area now that are planning for that significant population growth you're talking about and the demands. But I guess I'm still somewhat surprised that there's no overall plan that considers population growth demands, and because what we're doing here, I mean, while it was a good presentation and I appreciate it, it's just these projects you showed me, and I don't know what those relate to as far as what's the big picture. Is this reactive? Is it not reactive? Something just came up, or is, what's going to come up next year or the year before that, or in 2030? I think personally, I think that would be very helpful and useful, not only to me as a commissioner, but I would think that would be helpful and useful to Dominion. But
yes, sir. And I did want to clarify, part of what I was talking about earlier was on the, specifically on the project side, on the, what gas are we going to need upstream, the capacity and supply that we talked about before. Resource planning will produce, about a 15-year plan as far as demand forecast is concerned. So there is a greater plan. I don't want to make it seem like we're, just don't have an idea of what's out there and what the plan is. We do have that. I just didn't want to portray that we had a list of projects that was 10, 15, 20 years into the future.
I understand that, but then again, I know at least, again, from a water wastewater utility 20-year plan, yeah, they did have projects that they thought they would probably need in the next 20 years, broken typically in 5-year increments. Now, does those change? Yeah. But generally speaking, that is the plan. It's kind of what you're working to. We know we got to, we're going to have growth in this area. We're going to need to run a 36-inch line somewhere along this route. We need to start thinking about that. We're going to need this much supply, so we need to make sure we got adequate water supply or adequate sewage treatment. So again, kind of like with electrical, I really don't see the distinction why there's that pronounced difference between electrical, gas, and water and wastewater utilities. I mean, we all typically have the same projections or use similar information. So again, it's on the one hand, hand, I kind of heard down the electrical side too. You have it, but you don't have it. You have it, but it's really not put down anywhere. You know, I think it would just be useful to, hey, put it down on paper. Let's see it sometime. Let's know what we're talking about. Nothing's cast in stone. That's understood. But to me, while this is a great presentation, just doing this just because we checked the box and we got to see that we got these lines done that we put in. I don't know what that means. It just means you put in lines and you had to tell us because it exceeded $500,000. And I'm not being critical of you, man. You know, I understand you doing your job. One final question. One other question. When you say polyethylene, is that HDPE? You're talking about HDPE pipe?
Not necessarily. So in the polyethylene world, there's HDPE and MDPE. So the vast majority, well, I think all the pipeline on our system, we do have one little section, but is medium density polyethylene. And so if you're on a job, if you're out there looking at it, you'll notice different colors. And so the medium density polyethylene is yellow in color, and the higher density polyethylene is black. And we predominantly stick to the medium density polyethylene.
Is that just kind of like with the steel pipe? That's just my identification because I don't know. Is that or the steel pipe or the medium density, is that just based on pressure, or is it just a, you know,
it is
a cost thing? Okay.
It's more.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's more of a pressure thing in the design calculations that are required in CFR 192. So it's really just what's necessary to carry the gas in an efficient manner. And oftentimes you got to consider external loading and those sorts of things. And given soil types and things in our area, medium density meets the need.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Hewitt.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Any other commissioners?
Vice Chair Belzer, this is Commissioner Thomas.
Good morning, Commissioner Thomas. Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Hewitt, I appreciate your presentation, and I guess I kind of have a question following along Commissioner Caston's question. So in connection with getting the extra gas supply into the rapidly growing areas, lower part of the state in South Carolina, whether you're talking about for residential, commercial, or industrial, or power generation, or whatever, that really, to me, I think ties back to your slide number 5 that shows the pipelines that come into South Carolina. And that'd be Transco, Southern Natural, and the Berkshire Hathaway Energy. In order to get that gas, it has to come through those pipelines. I'm just trying to understand. And
yes, sir.
Those lines are full. Capacity is pretty much all taken. And it's get FERC approval to either increase the capacity or extend those lines. And so that's outside of Dominion, South Carolina's control. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And is there somebody, I would assume, there at the company that is pretty much constantly working on getting increases through that supply? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
But, in the end, I think that kind of ties back to Commissioner Caston's questions of long-range plans. And it's just really in whoever that person's hands are to try to make that happen. And this kind of ties back, I think, to some of the things that we heard either in the integrated resource plan or perhaps the rate case. I can't remember which, maybe both. But
We are to the extent that we can and we can affect that. So we have an outlook of the needs for the LDC. Presumably, the electric side of our business has somebody looking at their needs and what they have, and then we have a services organization that would take those two things together and be out, as you said, trying to find ways to get the necessary supply. The difficulty is the fact that all of the upstream pipelines are constrained. There's not a lot out there. Occasionally, you can cobble together some things from some marketers and people that are releasing capacity, but it's not large chunks of capacity and supply. And so what it's really going to take is a significant demand, a significant contract, and no one entity may be able to produce, the demand necessary to justify a project on the upstream side. And so oftentimes it's many LDCs coming together, it's different companies coming together to put the demand together for them to do that. And we work all the time trying to get those things to happen and get all those things to come together. But yes, sir, we're working. It's just not out there. The efficiencies, if you don't have large volumes of gas, the cost per decatherm or per unit of gas is extremely high if the volumes are small, and designing, constructing pipelines isn't cheap, meaning in the old days, there might be room in a pipeline. You could loop a facility. So what they might do on the transmission side is parallel a length of pipe along the transmission line to increase the capacity. They might be able to add a compressor station or increase horsepower to compressor station to be able to move more gas through the line. And the way we understand it and what we know about those pipelines is a lot of that easy capacity, as it were, is gone. And the going forward need would be new pipeline facilities, which are expensive to build in today's climate. And it takes a tremendous amount of gas to be able to make all of that work out in the end.
So I think what I'm hearing in terms of getting to this extra supply, you're sort of in a catch-22 situation. You have to have, let's just say, a bunch of huge industrial customers that are planning to move into the area, and they're going to need gas, or generating facility that's going to need gas, and they probably, can't really wait the 5 to 10 years that they have to commit to in order to get those pipelines built. And in the meantime, you never know if it's going to even end up being approved. So the difficulty is getting those long-term commitments for consumption and then getting the pipeline capacity approved. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Exactly.
Okay. One other little question for you here. And looking at your service area map, I noticed that you had Cherokee and Anderson counties. And so do you serve customers in those counties, or are those really connections to the transport pipeline?
The Cherokee County, I can tell you there's a couple up there, like Union, Cherokee. We've got the Dominion Carolina gas pipeline runs through that area. They're not an end-use kind of supplier to small loads. So we have what they call a farm tap. It's a small regulating station off of the interstate transmission line, and it serves, I think in Cherokee, it's 7 customers. So it's a small area up there, but yes, sir, we do have a few up that way.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. That's all I had.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioners, any other questions?
Vice Chair Belzer.
Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Williams, please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Huey, I really appreciate, as do my fellow commissioners that are new on the job, that you presented such great background on these individual requests. So my questions are kind of more in that that framework. So you've kind of opened yourself up to educating us, and I appreciate that. Now, this is for your project. What kind of growth, what kind of need do you need in order to establish an efficient project? So before we get into your 5-ish year timeline, what are you looking at that creates the demand? And I realize it's a blend of industrial and residential, but is there another way that you can characterize that for me in terms of efficiency or cost productivity?
Sure. So we, unlike some other utilities, are not, as they say, provider of last resort. My early career, I spent a lot of time at Bell South, several years doing outside plant construction, aerial construction, underground construction, those sorts of things. And, the telephone world is, water and sewers this way. You're not serving every single customer out there, but you're serving the vast majority of them. On the gas side, we do have to look at the financials and what are out there. From, an efficiency standpoint, we just can't serve anything and everything that's out there. It's got to make sense to the system. It's got to make sense for the existing customer rate base. And so we look to each project individually. If we have small projects come in, we'll look at individual projects and make a determination at that point whether or not we can serve it. Oftentimes that would amount in a contribution in aid. So if a customer, say a hotel restaurant opens up down the road and they just happen to be several miles off of a pipeline or several hundred feet or thousands of feet, we'll do an estimate. We'll put it up against their load. We'll look at other growth in the area. If there's something substantial that we can bank on, we can add that into the calculation. But we would look at it that way. A lot of the pipelines that I talked about today, went through several of them. The MUSC one was that sort of thing. That's sort of how that processed out. And then some of the other ones are just organic growth across the system that you're growing, you have pressure issues, and you've got to address those things in order to stand up the system and for the system to operate on the peak day. And then you've got the other section where you've got something like in West Ashley where it amounts to like a blank canvas where there's a lot of development, a ton of information about what's going, where it's going, and that sort of thing. And in those cases, we can efficiently design the pipeline system and the timing of it to meet the needs as it comes on. I hope that answered your question.
It definitely gave me a lot of good information, so thank you. Well, speaking of projects like East Edisto and Ferry Wharf, how long have you had those projects on your radar? As how do they mature into becoming projects that you bring to us as ones that are going to be completed?
For those two projects specifically, those were generated, as a lot of them are, through our sales and account management group. They're the ones that are out, again, talking to builders and developers and that sort of thing. And so in the case of Ferry Wharf, the team down there in Charleston, you find out about this development that's happening. They start talking to developers. They know people in the business. Developers and builders are calling us, looking at gas, and then we're working in conjunction with them as they develop the project and go through approval processes necessary for the development. And, we're starting to look at that point at how would we serve it, where would we come from, what would the route look like, what's the most efficient way to get there, what else could we serve along the way to make the pipeline more beneficial to existing customers and to potentially new customers along the route. And then same thing with the line over in East Edisto. and that one in particular, the East Edisto development is so large and it's such a big deal, and with it also being in our electric territory, there's a master services agreement that was put in place way early on, and we're a part of that master service agreement, meaning as we go in and they're talking to the developer and the developer needs, certain infrastructure, we're working through all of that in conjunction with electric, and then some of the other developments along the way, our builders and developer network and people that we know along with county planning, and we're watching and paying attention to developments that are coming through the planning process and that sort of thing.
Thank you. Do you specifically remember when East Edisto first kind of got onto your planning radar? I'm curious. You mentioned Long Savannah and kind of that being on hold for a bit, but I think it might be interesting given the discussion about 5 years, because I imagine that one's been on your radar for a lot longer.
That one has been. I don't remember exactly when. At the time, I think I was in Myrtle Beach as the engineering manager down there, so you have to forgive me about that. I know that it's been on the radar since East Edisto's been in development, that we've been looking at that, so it's got to be more than 5 or 7 years. I know we've been looking at timing of the project, and as you said, a lot of those developments early on, 5 to 10 years ago, as they were being developed, it was going to be a lot faster paced than it turns out it has been, and so we've been waiting and working along with them. But East Edisto in particular, that development, not necessarily the pipeline, has been on our radar for 5 to 7 years or longer.
Kind of piggybacking on Commissioner Caston's questions, my hunch from my prior life with the city of Charleston is it could have been on your radar 10 years
Could
or
have
more.
been. I would agree with that.
Okay. And my last question is, as a gas customer and as you've talked about reliability and interconnectivity, what would a customer experience, or what do you all experience where there's not enough pressure or the resource isn't as robust as you would want to design for? Where is interconnectivity a big benefit, not geographically, but in what conditions is interconnectivity and greater reliability?
Yes, ma'am. There's two things we look at from a reliability standpoint and interconnectivity. One is the first thing you mentioned, which is that sort of dotted color map I showed early in the presentation of pressures. We're watching that, and as we see lower pressure areas, we'll loop the system, we'll add another pipeline in, and the goal is on our planning day, the cold day that we plan for, because the way gas is used is there's a lot of heat dependent load, and so as the temperatures fall and it gets colder, the gas usage, the gas demand goes up, which puts stress on the system. And so what we would do in our planning process, and why we make such extensive use of the models, is we're forecasting out those cold days, and we're trying to the best we can, get the model to mimic what might happen in the system, so we can see those things and fix them before they become an issue. The other issue we have from a reliability standpoint, I mentioned distribution integrity management earlier, and the requirements that 192 have on all operators, LDCs anyways, in local distribution companies in that way. We have an annual list of our top 5 threats on our system according to distribution integrity, and the top of that list, I think from day one that regulation went into place, is third-party damage. And so, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our lines are in road rights-of-way by encroachment. There's lots of other utilities out there. There's people every day doing construction in those road rights-of-way, making tie-ins to roads, et cetera. And damage to utilities in general, not just gas, is a real issue. It's at the top of our list and something we pay attention to from a safety standpoint, from a reliability standpoint. So I mentioned that to say that there are times where if we have, for example, the Carolina Forest job, the River Oaks job, if we've got a substantial number of customers, 2,000, we will look at adding a second feed because you just don't know. It's not necessarily always a pressure issue, but if that single feed were to get cut, then you've got 2,000 outages, which is a big deal in the gas world.
Okay. Thank you very, Mr. Huey, for the education. I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Any other commissioners? Hey, thank you, Mr. Huey. We appreciate your presentation today. If y'all could bear with me just a moment.
Sure, thank you.
We need to break for about 10 minutes to give our court reporter and technical people a chance to have a small break. So it is, what, 11:30? 11:30. We will be back at 11:42. 11:42, please. Thank you. all tangled up. Good morning and welcome back. Let's take a quick roll call of commissioners. District 1,
Commissioner Williams is participating virtually.
District 3,
Caston present virtually.
District 4,
Irvin participating virtually.
District 5,
Thomas participating virtually.
District 6,
Chairman Williams participating virtually.
District 7, Commissioner Powers, I can't hear you. Can you give me a thumbs up? I see you. There we go. And I'm Florence Bells from District 2, and I'm present in the hearing room. We have all the commissioners present. Ms. Milton, are you ready to proceed with your presentation?
I am.
Thank you. Please feel free to go ahead.
All right.
Let's see, do we need to share her screen or something?
All right. So good morning, Commissioners and Council. My name is Laura McGill Milton, and I'm here today representing Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. South Carolina Environmental Law Project, we're a nonprofit public interest law firm dedicated to protection of South Carolina's environment. And Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League is a grassroots organization that works in rural and disadvantaged communities. We're here today to talk about the proposed pipeline, and that's the River Neck to Kingsburg and Florence County pipeline. To give you a little bit of background on what my clients and I know about the project and how we got involved, I'll let you know that on June 22nd of 2020, the Corps issued a public notice for SAC 2019-1427, and that public notice period ended, I think, July 6th. And prior to that public notice deadline, we submitted a letter on behalf of our clients at Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. And on July 27th, I received notice from the Corps stating that on July 6th, the United States Supreme Court had reinstated Nationwide Permit 12, which is for use for utility line activities, and that they would be reviewing the pipeline not as an individual permit, but as a nationwide permit. This pipeline runs parallel to the Great Petey River, which is an important scenic river that's enjoyed for recreation, and it's home to many beloved types of wildlife. And as we'll discuss coming up, there's already another smaller and working pipeline that runs parallel to this proposed pipeline. The evaluation under Nationwide Permit 12 has in large part functionally removed the ability of the public, which is a working class rural area of South Carolina. They're not really able to participate in the process or even be notified when the project is issued. And that's why we're here today, is because we want to learn more about this pipeline for our clients. I've searched the docket, and as we've already discussed, I've been unable to find anything about the pipeline. Haven't seen where it's been noticed, but my clients at Blue Ridge are aware that there's already engineering underway. Our clients are already being approached on eminent domain. This is heirs property that we're talking about, and there's a lot of concern in the area. This proposed project is planned for an extremely sensitive area. The project notice admits that it could endanger the federally listed red cockaded woodpecker, but it doesn't emphasize the devastation of these impacts. Deforestation removes the trees that these birds rely on, and it would take decades for any new growth to mature to the level for them to be habitable for these woodpeckers. The project also says that it will impact Canby's cowbane, which is another federally listed endangered species. And this herb is threatened due to exactly what's proposed here, the degradation and loss of the wetland habitat in which it grows. In the case of both Canby's cowbane and the red cockaded woodpeckers, there's still so much that we need to learn about their habitat and their needs. But what's clear is that they're threatened and what led to them becoming threatened is the same kind of impacts that we're still seeing today. As far as this pipeline, as we see, it's a 14.5 mile, 16-inch gas main. And it's going to run parallel to an existing 8-inch FERC-regulated natural gas transmission line that's going to remain in service. Dominion's website says that the project is for additional capacity and flexibility to meet current and anticipated customer needs. And in the permit notice, the applicant stated that it's to support the development of a gas main installation referred to as River next to Kingsburg. I suppose that one of my questions is that the proposed size, that 16 inches, if you look right here at this chart that I've put at the bottom, this is from 2016, you can see the mains by size. This is a lot bigger than, you know, anything that, I mean, very few pipelines are this large, as you can see. And I also understand that this project is supposed to terminate on a property that was proposed as a coal plant. I don't know if it's proposed as a gas plant now. I know that the coal plant, I believe, was subsequently abandoned, but nobody said this might be for a gas plant, but I just don't understand that 16 inches. It just seems very large for anticipated need down there. You know, one of our goals in appearing before you today is to note the concerns we have both with this pipeline project and as well with the mechanism for determining the prudence and necessity for a project like this before it's built, before the environment and property rights of people are impacted out there, and before the company itself, you know, incurs significant costs that'll be passed on to ratepayers or shareholders. This, again, the proposed project is just extremely sensitive, and the impacts from this are too important to take place in the shadows. With the energy problems in the state, we should be striving for transparency, but it seems to be the opposite. Like I said, this nationwide permit means that the public has really been shut out of this project in a lot of different ways. And to that end, it's really an environmental justice travesty. The community that's impacted is predominantly Black, working class, and it includes many heirs properties that have been in families for centuries. The impacted property owners have been dealt with unfairly. They've been offered a few $100s for easements that'll permanently scar their property. The land agents that are coming out there and talking to these people have threatened eminent domain, and the residents are feeling powerless. They've tried to collaborate and connect with one another to protect this land that's been entrusted to them for centuries, but the pandemic has made organizing hard, and so they're weekly jumping onto conference calls to discuss what they can do. And to this end, our clients feel like the system's broken. It's not protecting the citizens and the ratepayers from the fact that these gas companies can build giant projects with nobody to tell them that they can't, and they're wondering who's looking out for them. My clients are also concerned about the impacts to the environment and to their own safety. There's been a poor safety record. In 2019, at Pepper Pike in Ohio, a gas line exploded, and, you know, the resulting investigation by the Public Utility Commission, there was a report that said the cause of the explosion and fire was Dominion's failure to follow the established welding procedures, inefficient inspection and oversight, and lack of procedures and training regarding auger boring, which led to the pipeline being put under excessive strain. You know, there's other issues that we've seen and come up against. There's another one that was in Virginia in March of last year. Dominion was forced to pay $1.4 million in fines after illegally dumping more than 27 million gallons of polluted coal ash water into Quantico Creek in Virginia. But this is not just in other places. We're also talking in South Carolina. In 2018, Dominion was cited for failing to control sediment near a 55-mile pipeline it built in the upstate. Sediment ended up washing off the construction site and ended up into creeks that fed into the South Tiger River, where the Woodruff Roebuck Public Water District has an intake. And the runoff worked its way into the river, clogged that pipe, And Woodruff Roebuck system ended up having to buy water from another utility for over 10,000 customers south of Spartanburg. Ultimately, a $4,200 fine was issued by DHEC, and Dominion later stated that had minimal impact. Here, the city of Florence, drinking water is produced by a surface water treatment facility that withdraws from the Great Petey River, which runs along this proposed pipeline. That's my concerns that I wanted to bring to you today. Again, I'm just really concerned for our heirs property, our minority citizens that are affected by this pipeline, and I appreciate the time that you've given in listening to us today, and I know that they would too.
Thank you, Ms. Milton. Commissioners, any questions for Attorney Milton?
Vice Chair Belzer.
Chairman Williams.
Good morning, Ms. Milton. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm making it along, hopping along. Question for you: how many clients do you represent on this matter?
I personally represent Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. My client, who's the executive director of Blue Ridge Environmental Defense, is Mr. Zeller. He's on the line. My understanding is that there's a few dozen out there. If you want the exact number, he could let you know. But it's everybody who's been approached already by the eminent domain, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I would love to hear from the gentleman you referred to as to how many clients.
Okay, Mr. Zeller, can you hop on?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, we have.
Yes, sir. Just
the question. I'm sorry. Say again.
How many clients do you represent, sir?
We have in the Pamplico area. We have several dozen members. There's been a membership drive that we're tallying up, but there are roughly 40 people that we have identified in that area that are either property owners or actual residents of the Pamplico community.
Okay. So I think I heard some information in the presentation regarding some of the folks being offered around $100 or so for their land or threatened with eminent domain. Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct. Yes, they've been offered anywhere from a few $100s. You know, one of the reports, and if you look at the letter that I wrote, there's some linked articles in there, and some of the homeowners that we've spoken with have reported just being offered a couple $100. Of course, they don't want to sell their property. You know, of course, sometimes it'll increase, and sometimes they're just threatened with eminent domain.
Now, is that for an entire parcel or just for a right-of-way?
I believe that's just for the right-of-way.
Okay. So they're not actually selling the entire parcel, are they?
I'm not aware of where there's an entire parcel. Lou, do you know anything about that?
I do not know of any whole pieces of property, if that's the question, are being sold. Most of the offers are for, of course, access that was outlined earlier in the presentation today. But what the residents have been confronted with is rudeness and intimidating behavior, and it's caused a huge amount of dissension within the community above and beyond the few $100s that we're talking about because of the facts of heirs property. If you know some of the issues concerning heirs property, it involves generations of handing down property from one person to another, and it branches out like branches of a stream or a tree. And try to settle the problem of heirs property under these conditions of rudeness and intimidation have made the community in a turmoil.
Mm-hmm. I'm very familiar with
heirs property. Send a letter to the South Carolina Environmental Justice Office outlining some of these concerns.
Just a moment. Please, one person speak at a time, please. Commissioner Williams? Commissioner Williams, go ahead, please.
Vice Chair
Chair-
Belzer, are you talking to me?
I'm sorry, Chairman Williams.
Or,
Chairman Williams, please go ahead.
Sir, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I think there may be a delay on my end. I apologize if I interrupted you. I'm very familiar with heirs property, so I appreciate the difficulty in trying to navigate a path forward when you have so many interested parties involved in settling a dispute or agreeing to an offer. Heirs property, I have great appreciation of how difficult that can be. I want to unpack something that you said. Hopefully I heard you correctly when you said that more than the offer for the right-of-way of $100 or so, it may be a little more than that. Let's just say a few $100s. More than that was the rude and intimidating behavior that the residents have suffered. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
That question is to me. I'm just being sure.
Whoever can answer it.
If you would like, I'll let you jump in, Lou, unless you'd like me to.
Okay, fine. The word rude was used by one of the residents. I'm worried about using the names without giving their permission because of the retributions that people are worried about in this community. But land agents coming to the property time and time again, and two residents there, when they were told that they were not welcome and that the pressure just got worse and worse. And so this is a very conservative area, and the people are in conflict about it because some people have different opinions about things, and there's dissensions that go back generations in this area. So we have been having, for example, workshops about heirs property to help settle some of the issues which existed before the pipeline was proposed. But now it's been brought into sharp relief, and it's become an urgent matter.
Understood, sir. What I want to know is who treated your clients with rudeness, with rude behavior, and tried to intimidate them. When you say land agents, are you referring to Dominion Energy South Carolina specifically, or an agent of Dominion Energy South Carolina? I'm trying to understand who would think it would be okay to treat someone in a rude manner and then go even further and attempt to intimidate them. I'm trying to drill down on that.
Yes, I was addressing, this was specifically representatives of the Dominion Energy South Carolina pipeline company and their people who are going to the community about their Riverneck Kingsburg pipeline proposal.
Okay. Were these encounters reported in any way, shape, or form?
As I said before, we outlined some of these concerns in a letter to the South Carolina Environmental Justice Office.
Okay. And was there any follow-up on the allegations?
We're waiting for follow-up. We're waiting to hear back.
Okay.
They received the comments, and we're grateful.
Okay.
But we've not had any reply more than that.
Okay, understood. Did your organization consider involving the Office of Regulatory Staff?
If I can jump in here, at this point, I will be very candid and say that I have been unfamiliar with the Office of Regulatory Staff, but also the complaints that the homeowners have had out there are pretty well documented. It's so far as even land agents showing up unmasked in the middle of the pandemic to say, you have one more chance to sell this and things like that. I was unaware of that. I'm showing up here kind of, like I said earlier, as a last resort. I was unaware of that regulatory staff, but I'm bringing this to you guys just to try to get these residents first.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing the information to me. Considering my upbringing and being familiar with having family property going back over 150 years, it's sort of mind-boggling to think that someone would show up on, if this property is anything like the rural community that I grew up in, it's mind-boggling that someone would show up and try to intimidate residents, and then, or I should say, treat them in an undignified manner and then go as far as intimidate them. That would be a very dangerous proposition coming on some of the family farms in my area. It's sort of shocking to think that someone would have the audacity to do that. And so I'm just trying to make sure that, not saying that it didn't happen. Obviously, something happened because you all are reporting it. But in my former life as a prosecutor and defense attorney, I do know that different people see the same set of facts in very different ways. So I want to make sure that I drill down and understand that, or try to determine if there was, in fact, intimidation techniques used, if the residents were treated in a rude manner. I would really be interested about that and want to know the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, so forth and so on, because that's very, very concerning to me. Let me ask you this, and this is for either counsel or the client. What's the fix to this issue? Are you advocating no pipeline at all, or do you think an increased offer on the right-of-way would be fair? Would an apology from, and I don't know if it's fair to say Dominion Energy South Carolina, let's just say the land agents, whoever those people were that were accused of rudeness and intimidation, would that solve some of your concerns, or is your position that no pipeline should be constructed?
Counselor?
Let me jump in here with this and go ahead and say our big concern and the biggest reason that we're here today is that if this is a FERC-regulated pipeline, they would need to show the need and then move the project out from there. With a pipeline of this large a diameter, we're not sure of the anticipated needs that this is supposed to be serving. The homeowners, I will be very candid with you, this being Eric's property, this being entrusted to them centuries down the line, this is very precious to them. And quite frankly, most of our clients are not interested in selling their land in any way to Dominion for this pipeline. Again, they have security concerns. They have not been dealt with politely. So I think you can talk about a cure as far as how they're approached, or, maybe wearing masks when they're approached or things like that. But it doesn't take the salt out of the wound that a lot of these people really just want to hand this down to the next generation as it was entrusted to them. Lou, do you have anything to add?
I think that sums it up very well.
Okay, so one last question. Now, you would agree that a pipeline or a right-of-way for a pipeline in and of itself would not completely disturb the use and enjoyment of a parcel of land?
I do not know that I would necessarily agree. I think it's a really, situationally driven, kind of approach, depending on where it's coming through on a certain, piece of property. We've talked to a lot of different homeowners who have special family places or things like that this pipeline might be coming through. We've talked about to homeowners who had places where they would go fishing with their families, farming with their families. This is the land that fed them, that they grew up on or may have played on. So it really depends on where the property, where it's cutting through. I wouldn't necessarily say that, partial use doesn't, rob them of what's special to them. That really is private to each of the homeowners.
Understood. Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Williams. Any other commissioners?
Madam Chair Lady?
Vice Chair Belsler.
Commissioner Irvin. I heard Commissioner Irvin first.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we could have a stakeholders hearing in the Pamplico community after notice, and a virtual hearing in light of the pandemic that we're suffering under could be scheduled, and so that all the stakeholders could be heard. Would the company be willing to participate in such a virtual hearing if it were allowed?
Commissioner Irvin, to be quite candid with you, I think we're kind of mixing a couple different things here. I certainly understand the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League's position when it comes to permitting, and then it kind of bleeding over into the jurisdiction of this commission. I think there's a permitting process that has to be followed. That's within the jurisdiction of another agency. I'm not entirely sure. I am familiar with the fact that the company does engage in, I think Mr. Huey spoke to this, it does engage with community outreach about projects. The manner in which we go about doing that now, I'm not entirely sure of with respect to the pandemic. So we may already be doing some of the things that you're suggesting here.
Well, thank you for that response. Sometimes some of these concerns can be dealt with, in a forum where parties are given an opportunity to be heard. And of course, the other option, you could go to a mediation format where you could have a representative for the parties appear and to see if some of these issues can be resolved amicably. That was my thinking, is so that this doesn't fester and create problems, unintended consequences. I'm just suggesting that. I know that it's kind of a gray area, but are you saying the permitting process would be before FERC or someone else?
No, sir. The permitting process, and admittedly, I'm not the environmental lawyer for the company, but the permitting process, as I understand it from reading the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League's presentation and comment letters, carried out through the Corps of Army Engineers. So they're the entity that handles that. But what I can tell this commission is, I've listened to the comments that have been said here today. I've listened to the questions that have been asked by the commissioners here today, and I know Mr. Huey has as well. And the concerns are duly noted. And if I know Dominion well, and I think I do, I've been working there for a while, that these comments will be given consideration and we will inform management about it. And to the extent that that some of these things turn out to be accurate from what's been said here, then I would fully expect Dominion to address those with the folks who may have engaged in those actions. But I don't know that to be the case at this point in time. I'm just hearing all this for the first time. So
it just might be helpful for the entire process if I don't know if the Army Corps of Engineers has a public hearing procedure. I'm not familiar with their rules and regulations, but it seems that some kind of informal process that could help resolve some of these issues and conflicts. Could be a pre-litigation mediation format that might be helpful just to get to the bottom of it before it festers and we right now, of course, with the coronavirus pandemic, there are no jury trials. So I don't know how you could proceed to eminent domain if you wanted to. The Chief Justice has called off all jury trials, and of course you've got a period of discovery and appraisal and all that would have to be done. You're probably looking at a 2 or 3 year process before you could even get the cases resolved at trial. So that's another reason why it'd be good to try and mediate it in advance and try to work through all the issues. I'm just suggesting that. And I think that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Thank you, Commissioner Irvin.
The nationwide permit process that the Corps has now undertaken differs from the individual process in such that they had a public comment period. Generally, sometimes they'll hold a meeting or something like that, but now that this is under a nationwide permit, Blue Ridge Environmental Defense and its clients are now kind of shut out of the process. I am having to check with the Corps on an annual basis just to see if the permit's been issued. There's no notice that the permit's been issued or any more comment, no more public meeting. They're really just not a part of what's happening from here, and they feel shut out considering that this is their community.
Any other commissioner questions?
Vice Chair Belcher.
Commissioner Caston?
Ms. Milton, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, thank you.
Good. I wasn't sure I heard your answer to Chair Williams' question on whether are you opposed, or you and your group opposed to the proposed route of the gas line, or are you opposed to the gas line or any line? I mean, that wasn't very clear to me. I may have misunderstood.
Okay. Yeah, let me jump in and go ahead and clarify. I personally, I'm speaking on behalf of my clients. My clients are very unclear on the need for this. Like I said, generally with a FERC, pipeline, they would have to say, here's the need, here's the anticipated need, here's what we're serving. I don't think that has become clear to these people why they need to give up their land for a need that's unclear. We're talking about a 16-inch pipeline, which is kind of unprecedented. There's not that many of those. A large pipeline traveling through their area. These homeowners in particular, considering that this is heirs property entrusted to them, a lot of them don't want to sell. If we're talking about moving the route of the pipeline, are we just making their problem somebody else's problem? It's an individual thing that's on my clients, but I'll tell you that their heirs property and the land that was entrusted to them is important to them. They don't feel like they've been dealt with fairly. I can't say whether that would change for them or anything, because they haven't been dealt with fairly up until this point, but I will tell you that they are very protective over the land that's been entrusted to them. And they're afraid about the environmental and safety concerns with the pipeline.
So I'm still not sure I understood you, but I think I understood you to say that even if the proposed line was not on that route, you would be probably opposed to the line wherever it went. Is that correct?
Again, this is my clients. It's not my personal, this is theirs. We're talking about a tight-knit community where neighbors care about neighbors. I don't know that any of the neighbors would feel okay making the pipeline that's now coming through their property coming through their neighbors. You're talking about a community where that might be an auntie, a grandma, a cousin, or something like that, a friend. So I can't say that they would be willingly, to bounce that to somebody else. I think that what the community wants is a greater understanding of what the need here is for, why they have to sacrifice this. I think they want more answers. And that's what I would say where it is right now. They're opposed to it as it stands right now. They would like more answers.
When as I understand it, and I could be wrong, I think FERC is primarily concerned or has jurisdiction over interstate. So this is interstate, and if I understood Mr. Huey correctly, they have engineering group that looks at the projections, demands, though I think it would be far more prudent to have a 15 to 20-year plan. They do look at projections in those areas for that long. I can say this firsthand experience, having worked with a utility, a water utility, not a gas utility, is that 16-inch line wasn't very big for us. It may be for gas. I'm not trying to, downplay the size of the line. But it was not unusual at all to have to run lines and acquire easements. Our utility did have the use of eminent domain. We never used it. We always found a way to work that out. But the owner did not always have to give up the property. We sometimes paid them for an easement, and they maintained the use of the property, with certain restrictions, whatever we all agreed to. You can't build a structure on it. You can farm on it. You do whatever. We were able to work those out. But I can also say this: if there was not some ability to run whatever lines, water line, gas line, phone line, sewer line, electric line, we would all be sitting here in the dark, and we wouldn't be having this meeting because nobody would have anything to talk on or see from. So I'm not sure what the path forward seems to be that would meet your criteria, but I think surely an engineering plan has been done to determine what size it is, and perhaps Mr. Huey or Dominion would be very willing to share their plan, their engineering plan, why the line's that size and why it's heading in that direction. Has Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League, have they performed any engineering studies or looked at any population projections or anything in that particular area?
I'm sorry, did you just ask if Blue Ridge Environmental Defense had done projections for the area?
Yes, ma'am.
They have
I
not.
mean, are you familiar with the area? I mean, do you know what the demands may be, or if there's any population growth or I am not. When again, I'm not trying to push Mr. Huey or Dominion to do anything out of the ordinary, but I'm assuming that they have performed an engineering study, that they have looked at the demands, and I assume they would be willing to share at least that sort of information. And Mr. Huey, if I am putting words in your mouth, I don't mean to.
This is Lou Zeller, if I might add. We're, in answer to your question about gas transmission, that is the question for the company to answer, obviously, but we are not Luddites, but I do believe the well is poisoned in Pamplico because of the behavior that I've cited before.
Now, by well being poisoned, do you mean that everyone in Pamplico is opposed to any gas line running through Pamplico?
could you repeat that? I'm sorry. It cut out for a moment on my
I'm
side.
sorry. I was not sure exactly what that meant. What do you mean by the well is poisoned in Pamplico? Does that mean, are you saying that no one in Pamplico wants any line or that particular gas line, or I'm not sure. Could you kind of clarify that statement?
By the well is poisoned, there are people who will have a hard time with this no matter what you do in terms of a hearing and whatnot. We've been working in Pamplico for a year now, Blue Ridge has, with residents there.
Well, I think Mr. Chairman Williams asked a question, and not trying to put words in his mouth, but I think, and I'm paraphrasing or thinking along similar lines, then what is the path forward? I'm not sure what the solution is, or what proposed solution you have, or I'm not sure what it is you really want.
Speaking on behalf of Blue Ridge, I will tell you that the catalyst for us coming here today was simply, we're dealing with a group of homeowners that don't feel like they've been heard or respected, that they have some interest, and they have some beautiful stories about their land, their families, the wildlife that they enjoy around, and they just wanted to be heard. And quite frankly, due to the course process of the nationwide permit, haven't really gotten the opportunity to be heard. And that's what today was for, is this is kind of a last resort to get their perspective heard, the other side of the pipelines that we're discussing, the construction projects that we're seeing, that there are real people, real families that are impacted on the backside of this.
Okay, absolutely, I understand that. Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Any other commissioners with questions?
Vice Chair Belzer, this is Commissioner Williams.
Commissioner Williams, please go ahead.
Thank you. Attorney Milton, thank you for bringing this to us. I was taking notes when Mr. Huey was talking, and what I recorded, I wanted to see if this was also what you heard, and whether residents understood this. What I heard is there was an existing easement, which by the way happens to be, I think, really clear on Google Maps, from the 1960s. It was 40 feet wide, I think, and that what the request right now was an additional 10 feet. Is that something that the community is aware is the intent? Did you hear what I heard as well?
That is what I understood. As to individual homeowners and what they understand, I think some do have an understanding. I think that some don't. And again, I think that sometimes that 10 feet, again, there's areas of people's property that is, holds, special place in their heart, whether that's where they had activities or something like that. And a lot of them are just still opposed.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners, any other questions? Ms. Milton, are you aware that the Public Service Commission is created by the General Assembly and only has the jurisdiction and authority granted to it by the General Assembly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are you aware that this commission is not given any kind of authority over the siting of gas pipelines in intrastate gas pipelines in South Carolina?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And this notice that was provided, that you provided in your materials, it is a joint notice between or from the Army Corps of Engineers and the South Carolina Department of Health and South Carolina Department of Health and Environment, or control known as DHEC. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And the decision on whether or not this pipeline will come under the nationwide permit 12, that decision is still pending. Is that correct?
That decision is pending, but they are assessing this project under nationwide permit 12, meaning they're not proceeding currently with it as an individual permit. It's being looked at under nationwide permit 12.
Okay. So if it proceeds under that nationwide permit 12, and I'm not familiar with that, but there would not be a hearing before DHEC, is that correct?
No. If it's approved under nationwide permit 12, they're basically going to grant it. I'll have to keep following up with the Corps to find out if it's approved, and that's kind of it from there. After that, Dominion will do what it does.
So, I mean, is it pretty much all in the hands of the Corps, the Corps, and not with DHEC? I mean, the Corps they seem to be driving this. Is that, or monitoring this more than DHEC? Is that correct?
The Corps is driving this. Yep.
Okay. All right. I appreciate your presentation today and what you have given to us. It's just a quandary right now as what our jurisdiction will allow. So we've got to do some thinking. So, but thank you for your participation.
Yes, thank you all.
Commissioners, are there anything else before we close this proceeding today? To all participants, on behalf of my fellow commissioners, I'd like to thank you for your presentations today. You've answered some questions for us that I think were under the notice, and we've also gotten some information that may be helpful to us in future proceedings that maybe was a little bit broader than what was noticed, but appreciate your candor, your forthrightness, and your presentations today. And with that, we're going to close today's proceeding. Thank you very much.